Psalm 92:14 says, "They still bear fruit in old age. They are ever full of sap and green." Hi, I'm Rob West. When it comes to retirement, many of us are taught to think mainly in terms of escape. Escape from work, pressure, schedules, and responsibility. But is that the full biblical vision? Today we'll consider what Scripture says about retirement and how to steward our later years with purpose and faithfulness. And then we'll take your calls at 800-525-7000. This is Faith and Finance Live, biblical wisdom for your financial decisions. For many people, retirement is pictured as the finish line. Work hard, save diligently, invest wisely, and one day you'll finally arrive at a season of leisure. No alarm clocks, no deadlines, no demands. And after decades of work, rest is a good gift. There's nothing wrong with enjoying a slower pace or spending more time with family, traveling, or having more flexibility in your schedule. But Scripture gives us a deeper vision for our later years. Retirement may change the rhythm of our lives, but it doesn't end our calling as stewards. That's an important reminder because many people reach retirement and find themselves asking, now what? Without the familiar structure of work, the transition can feel disorienting. For years, your calendar, responsibilities, relationships, and even your sense of purpose may have been shaped by your vocation. When that changes, it can feel like something has been lost. But in God's kingdom, no season is wasted. We see a helpful picture of this in Numbers 8. The Levites were instructed to begin their service in the tabernacle at age 25 and then transition at age 50. But they didn't stop serving altogether. They stepped back from certain forms of labor, but they continued to minister to their brothers. In other words, they didn't retire from purpose. They moved from labor into legacy. As we age, certain types of work may no longer be possible. Energy changes, capacity changes, responsibilities change, but our purpose in God's kingdom does not expire. The same hands that once built, typed, managed, served, or led can now mentor, teach, encourage, pray, and support. The same heart that once poured itself into a career can now pour itself into people. Maybe that means volunteering with a ministry that reflects your passion. Maybe it means mentoring young professionals or young parents. Maybe it means serving more faithfully in your church, caring for aging parents, helping with grandchildren, or simply being more available to encourage others. Whatever the expression, the heart of stewardship remains the same, offering your time, wisdom, experience, and resources for the glory of God. Think of Simeon and Anna in Luke 2. Both were advanced in years, and yet both were living with expectancy and devotion. Simeon was righteous and devout, waiting for the consolation of Israel. Anna worshiped with fasting and prayer night and day. Their lives remind us that faithful presence is a powerful gift. God doesn't retire his servants, he repurposes them. That doesn't mean retirement has to be frantic or overfilled. This isn't about proving your value through constant activity. In God's economy, usefulness is not measured by productivity, but by faithfulness. That's a word many of us need to hear. Our culture often measures significance by title, output, income, and visible achievement, but God sees differently. He sees the quiet prayer, the faithful encouragement, the wisdom shared across the table, the hospitality or generosity, the steady presence in the life of a child, a neighbor, a church member, or a younger believer. So if you're approaching retirement, one of the wisest questions you can ask is not merely, what am I done with, but what am I now free to do for God's kingdom? And if you're already retired, maybe today is a moment to revisit that question. What experience has God entrusted to you? What wisdom has He formed in you? What time do you have that you didn't have before? Those are not leftovers, they're stewardship opportunities. Retirement may look different from your working years, but it's no less important. It may become one of the most spiritually rich chapters of your life if you choose to steward it well. So don't simply retire from something, retire to something. My devotional, Our Ultimate Treasure, a 21-day journey to faithful stewardship, is designed to help you do just that. To slow down, open God's Word, and consider what it means to treasure Christ above all else in every season of life. You can place your order today at faithfi.com/shop. And if you'd like to go through it with your church or small group, we offer bulk discounts. That's faithfi.com/shop. Back with your questions after this, 800-525-7000. Stick around.
The opinions offered during this program represent the personal or professional opinions of the participants given for informational purposes only. Any information provided is not intended to replace advice from a financial, medical, legal, or other professional who understands your specific situation.
Well, great to have you with us today on Faith and Finance Live. I'm Rob West. We're taking your calls and questions today on anything financial. So go ahead and get in the queue. We'll be, again, taking those calls here in just a moment. That number to call, 800-525-7000. That's 800-525-7000. We'd love to be able to help you think about managing God's money God's way. That means starting with God's Word so we understand what His principles, the wisdom we find in Scripture, accepting our role as stewards, putting money in its proper place as a tool to accomplish God's purposes. Now, we understand you're going to have various questions that come up in your financial life, in your spending plan, in your debt repayment, and your investing, in your preparation of the next steward. You know, the final decision we'll make, and this can't happen all at once, it has to happen over a lifetime, is we have to have the next steward chosen and prepared. And part of that preparation includes passing spiritual capital and character capital well before financial capital. You see, if wisdom grows faster than wealth for the next generation, we've got a real danger zone there. But if wealth grows faster than wisdom, we're in a danger zone. But the goal is for wisdom to outpace the wealth. And then when the wealth is transferred, it's able to be received by a wise and faithful steward who can use it as a tool for God's glory. It doesn't at that point become something that is an idol or a stumbling block. No, it's fuel in the engine that's already propelling you in the direction of Jesus and can actually accelerate that in ways that allow you to participate in God's redemptive purposes through investing and giving. But there's a lot of groundwork that goes into that. What does that look like? How do you make those decisions on how much to leave to the next generation? And then there's the practical considerations, a trust or a will. So whatever you're thinking about today, we've got lines open for you. We'd love to hear from you at 800-525-7000. You can call right now. In the news today, with July 4th celebrations in the rearview mirror, many student loan borrowers are now facing major changes to the federal loan system that took effect on July 1st. The changes will affect both new borrowers and, eventually, millions of existing borrowers. While much of the attention is focused on the end of the Biden administration's SAVE repayment plan, Congress also approved sweeping reforms last year that reshape borrowing limits and repayment options going forward. The changes are already prompting borrowers to review their repayment plans and understand what applies to them before making any decisions. New federal borrowers now have just two primary repayment options. The new Repayment Assistance Plan, RAP is the acronym they're using, and that bases payments on income and a tiered standard repayment plan based on the loan balance. The law also imposes new borrowing limits. Graduate students, professional students, and Parent Plus borrowers all face tighter annual and lifetime caps, while new Graduate Plus loans have been eliminated. Existing borrowers generally are not required to switch immediately. Many may remain in their current repayment plans for a transition period, although some legacy plans will eventually be phased out over the next 2 years. Some aspects of the Education Department's implementation are already facing court challenges. We're not surprised. In addition, federal judges recently blocked separate administration rules that would have restricted eligibility for public service loan forgiveness and narrowed the definition of certain professional degree programs, although those rulings didn't halt the core repayment changes enacted by Congress. So bottom line here is there's a lot of moving parts. Financial aid experts say the biggest mistake borrowers can make in this transition season is assuming every headline applies to them. So before changing repayment plans, consolidating loans, or borrowing additional money, borrowers should determine whether they're considered new or existing borrowers under the new law. Bottom line is just be careful as you're making decisions here, especially while there's things in transition. You just want to understand the implications for you. All right, we're ready to dive into your questions today. We do have still some lines open. You can call right now, 800-525-7000. Let's go to Belleville, Illinois. Gloria, go right ahead.
Hi. I have some repairs that needs to be done to my home. Actually, it's like retaining walls outside. And I got a quote for $15,000. Well, I didn't qualify for a home equity line of credit. And so it seems like my only option right now is to refinance. Right now, my mortgage is, the interest rate on my mortgage is 4%. But if I do refi, it's going to be 6.125%. And so I'm just trying to see, would it be wise? I mean, not wise, but just get advice on whether or not I should do the refinance or not. Yeah. And right now I owe $83,000 on my house, and the equity in it is $245,000.
$245,000. Okay. Yeah, so you've got good equity in it, and you've got a nice low rate. What was the reason they said for the denial on the HELOC?
Because of my credit history.
Okay. What is your credit score? Do you know?
It's like 680.
Okay. And when they say credit history, did you have some missed payments or a charge-off? Yes. Or what did you have in your past?
Because of a charge-off. Because I had a charge-off back like a year ago.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I'm going to be really hesitant here, Gloria, to refinance this loan. I mean, you've got a great interest rate, and if you refinance the entire balance at, with your credit score, it would likely be, it could be 7% or higher. And you put that on all the remaining mortgage debt, that's just going to, cause you to pay, probably as much as $10,000 or more in added interest. Now, if the repairs are urgent, we've got to find a way to pay for them, and hopefully we can delay that as much as possible. But I guess that would be my next question is how urgent are these repairs at this point?
It's pretty urgent because I'm on a hill. And I have railroad ties, and they're rotted, and so I really need to. Look, whenever it rains, the mud is just kind of. It's pretty urgent.
Okay, all right, yeah. I mean, and how many lenders did you talk to on that HELOC option?
3.
Okay, and they all said the same thing.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah. I mean, you should be able to qualify for a HELOC. I mean, it's more than just your credit report. I mean, your credit score at 680 is not terrible. The best thing you have going for you is you have really strong home equity at $245,000 on a $83,000 loan. Obviously that past charge-off is going to be the biggest obstacle, but they're going to look at your debt-to-income ratio, your income and ability to repay, your recent credit history, and then the amount of the equity in the home. So, I'd probably check with a local credit union. They tend to be, local banks and credit unions tend to be more flexible. And then I would check with our friends at Movement Mortgage as well. They do home equity loans and have been great partners here. You could go to faithfi.com/movement. That's faithfi.com/movement. And if you do those two options, the local banks and credit unions, not the big national ones, but something local and more regional, and Movement, and then call me back and let's see if we can find another option. Stay on the line. We'll talk a bit more. We'll be right back. Great to have you with us today on Faith and Finance Live. I'm Rob West. Well, we've got lines open. We're ready for your questions today at 800-525-7000. That's 800-525-7000. You can call right now. Let's go to Chattanooga. Rod, thanks for calling, sir. Go ahead.
Thank you for taking my call. I appreciate it. I'm just curious about something. I'm retired, and I don't have very much in an IRA. Got a little bit in savings, both with Schwab, and I have a family member that's older than me. When they pass away, I inherit all they have. Is there any advantage for me to keep the IRA.
Yeah. Yeah, there could absolutely be an advantage to keeping the IRA, even if you don't, currently need the money to live on. First of all, you get the continued tax-deferred growth. So as long as the money stays in the IRA, it can continue to grow tax-deferred or tax-free if it's a Roth. You'll have required minimum distributions. So at age 77, if it's a traditional, you've got to continue making your annual RMD. You can't simply leave it there, which I'm sure you've been along the way. But you don't have to spend the distribution if you don't need it, and you could do a qualified charitable distribution straight to a charity, and then you wouldn't have to pay tax on it as it comes out. With regard to future needs, while Social Security covers your expenses today, the IRA is going to provide some cushion for unexpected health care costs, if you needed long-term care, certainly inflation, any unforeseen expenses. And then finally, legacy planning. If you don't need the IRA during your lifetime, it can become part of the inheritance you leave to your beneficiaries, including ministries, if there's not heirs there. In terms of the older family member naming you as a beneficiary, you don't need to change your own IRA strategy simply because you may inherit another retirement account. If you do inherit it, the distribution rules will depend on your relationship to the deceased and what type of account it is. So I would just evaluate that, when and it's received. But let me stop there and just get your thoughts on all that.
So you're saying really I should go ahead and just keep the IRA, even though I won't need it to live on.
That's right, because, we don't know what the future can hold. Now, if you define enough and you have defined your financial finish line, both with what you have today as well as what you're expecting in the future, then one of the other benefits you have is to accelerate your giving. Because, one of the things I think we don't want to do, and I think too often we can get into this trap, is, many folks will overaccumulate during their lifetime. And they'll sit on far more than they need, planning to give it away at death, when they could get some of it into God's economy right now. And so you have the opportunity to do a qualified charitable distribution to the extent you, in fact, have gone beyond your lifetime finish line, meaning what you need in total assets and you've accumulated beyond that. Well, for 2026, you could do up to $111,000, and that's per individual. Wow. Yeah, through a qualified charitable distribution. So that money would come out of the IRA and go straight to a ministry like Moody Radio, let's say, and you don't add $1 to your taxable income, which means you're just getting far more into God's kingdom to advance the gospel. And in the case of Moody, train the next generation of Moody pilots, or, the global Bible school, or, all of the great things that are going on. That's just one example, but that could be a wonderful opportunity for you.
Okay. Hadn't realized all that. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, Rod. Listen, thanks for your call. If we can help you further along the way, don't hesitate to reach out. 800-525-7000 is the number to call. Let's go to Miami, and let's see. Kalia, go ahead.
Hi, Rob. Thank you so much for taking my call.
Of course.
I had a quick question. I'm struggling with credit card debt. The debt that I have is exactly $8,900, and the APR is 23.49. So I'm kind of in a pickle here because I can't, pay that debt right now. In a situation. So I was wondering what the best options would be, because I've already communicated with my credit card company to see if they have any extra hardship programs, to lower the interest. I've read about consolidation, personal loan, hearing negative things about consolidation, personal loan. So I just was trying to see what would be the best route to go with this debt that I can't seem to get down, obviously, for the hardship I'm dealing with.
Yeah, well, there's another option here, Kalia, that's actually my preferred option for how you pay down this debt, and it's what's called debt management. or you may hear it referred to as credit counseling. So within the creditors, each credit card company has what's called a credit counseling department. And in the credit counseling department, they offer lower interest rates, dramatically lower than the prevailing rate. So you're at 23.49, the typical interest rate, and it varies by creditor, so it would depend on which one you have, but it should be somewhere between 0 and 11%. But you can only access that program through a nonprofit credit counseling agency. So we have worked here at Faith 5 for many years, more than a decade, with Christian credit counselors, and they're wonderful. They've worked with literally thousands of our listeners. You'll go to christiancreditcounselors.org. They will evaluate the card that you're with, the creditor. They'll tell you what the new interest rate would be. You'd make one monthly payment to them, probably somewhere around between 2 and 3% of the balance. So at $8,900, if it's 2%, it's $178 a month. If 3%, $267, somewhere in between there. The nice thing is, though, that they'll pass it on to the creditor, but now it'll be at a dramatically lower interest rate. So now you get more going to principal. You keep the one level payment. You're not taking out a new loan, and you're going to pay it back on average 80% faster. How does that sound, though?
That sounds awesome. Thank you so much, Rob.
Yeah.
I really appreciate
You're welcome.
it. And it's a
no
Discover
problem.
card. Hopefully that's not a problem.
Yeah, no, it won't be. So just head to christiancreditcounselors.org, or if it's easier, just go to faithfi.com/CCC. faithfi.com/CCC. And listen, you're going to love them. They love Jesus. They're all about helping God's people get out of debt. This program is the way to do it. If you have about more than roughly $4,000 in credit card debt, this is the way I recommend folks go. Hey, Kalia, God bless you. Thanks for calling today. We'll be right back on Faith and Finance Live. So grateful to have you with us today on Faith and Finance Live. I'm Rob West. We're taking your calls and questions today. The number to call, 800-525-7000. We've got lines open. We're ready to hear from you today, and we'd love to get you on the program. Again, that number, 800-525-7000. You can call right now. Let's head back to the phones. We'll head down to Florida. Scarlett, how can I help you?
Hi there. Yeah, I was just wondering about the new Trump accounts for children 18 and under. They get $1,000 for the, 1 through 5, I think. And I didn't know if it would be good to put money into that or for a 529 account for my grandson.
Yeah. Was he born between 2025 and now?
Yeah. Yeah, he just turned 1.
Okay. Yeah, so you definitely want to take advantage of that $1,000 seed contribution into the Trump account. You open that with that form 4547 when you file your tax return, and that way you'll go ahead and take advantage of that benefit. You don't want to leave that on the table. But in terms of additional funds that you would put away, if the goal is really, Scarlett, to pay for education, the 529 plan generally provides better tax benefits because the earnings grow tax-free like a Roth IRA, which is really powerful. You get qualified educational withdrawals that are tax-free. And then many states, now you're in Florida, so this wouldn't apply because you don't have a state income tax, but many states offer tax benefits for contributions. The Trump account is really more of a long-term wealth-building account than an education-specific account. So it's going to give you tax-deferred growth, not tax-free growth. So you pay the tax when it comes out. Still a benefit, just not as compelling. The investments are limited primarily to low-cost U.S. stock index funds. And then generally we're talking about contributions capped at $5,000 plus that $1,000 seed contribution. So I think if the primary goal is paying for college or education, I'd go with the 529. If it's something that's more generally long-term wealth building or giving the child a head start for adulthood, that's where I think the Trump account can do well, or a combo of the two where, you take full advantage of the $1,000, but, if we're saving for college, we direct additional funds into the 529.
Okay, and one more question. So if the parents open up the account, like the 529 or the Trump one. And I contribute to that. Do I get credit for that on my taxes and stuff? Or how does that work?
Yeah. So what is your relationship? Are you the grandmother?
It's my grandson, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Very good. Yeah. So it really depends. I mean, anyone can contribute to the 529. There is no federal income tax deduction for 529 contributions. So it's not like a traditional IRA where you put the money in, you get the deduction. Some states offer a state income tax deduction or credit, but again, that's not going to apply to Florida. So there's really not any benefit, even if you were the one opening the account. I realize in this case it's your grandchild's parents, your son or daughter-in-law, but there's not any tax benefit for you putting the money in. The tax benefit comes in the tax-deferred growth, but that's ultimately going to benefit the beneficiary, your grandchild. So there's really nothing that would come your way anyway. But the good news is, in either of these cases, the 529 or the Trump account, even if you're not the one to open the account, and I would agree the parents are probably the best ones to do that, you absolutely, can contribute to those accounts. You're not going to get any tax benefit, but you wouldn't even if you were the owner.
That answered all my questions. Thank you so very much.
All right, you're welcome. Thanks for your call today. Lord bless you. 800-525-7000 is the number to call. We've got some lines open today. We'd love to hear from you. In a recent issue of our Faithful Steward magazine, Randy Alcorn wrote a great article for us on this idea of living simply. But when we think about living simply, I think this is just so important. It's not about living simply for simplicity's sake. It's really about the reason that we live simply and we would own less or we would spend frugally is so we can intentionally use that money to serve others. And I just love this idea because, you're living simply and creating more margin is ultimately fuel for feeding the hungry and supporting missions and furthering God's kingdom. You see, simplicity for its own sake, especially if we spend any extra money on ourselves, I think misses the point. It's not about just saying no to material things. It's about saying yes to God. And what Randy does in this fabulous article is he just goes through and unpacks some of the reasons why we would live simply and what it allows us to do. For instance, we live simply and we give generously because this isn't our true home. You see, the biggest obstacle to generosity is forgetting that we're not home yet. Imagine staying at a hotel during a long trip to a foreign country and you're allowed to earn money and you can send it back home, but you can't take anything with you when you leave. Well, would you fill up your hotel room with fancy furniture and artwork? Well, of course not. You'd send what you could back to your real home. And that's the reality for every believer. You see, this world is our temporary residence. The new earth is where, and the new heaven is where everything will be reconciled. That's our permanent home. So why would we invest so heavily in what we can't keep that's ultimately going to burn up when we can invest in what will last forever? I think the second idea here is that we live simply because it shifts our focus back to God. You see, it takes us to a place where we break free from the gravitational pull of materialism and reorient our hearts and our lives around heaven's values, because giving reminds us that life isn't about accumulating things. It's ultimately about surrendering to God's purposes. I think thirdly, we live simply because think about this. We're like God's delivery system. God uses his people to meet the needs of the world. We're his stewards, kind of like delivery drivers. But imagine the FedEx driver refusing to drop off packages because he or she thought the contents were theirs. Well, the whole system will fall apart. And I think in the same way, God blesses us not to increase our standard of living, but to increase our standard of giving. And if we forget that everything we've been given ultimately belongs to him, well, we'll hoard instead of deliver. And I think that's a big idea here. Fourthly, we live simply because eternal rewards far outweigh earthly luxuries. You see, when we choose a smaller home, when we sell expensive jewelry or skip the latest tech gadget, It seems like a sacrifice, but if those choices free up funds for God's work, the return is eternal. Jesus promised that we're storing up treasures in heaven when we invest in his kingdom. So therefore, every time we say no to materialism, we say yes to eternal joy. I hope that's something you can kind of meditate on today, that perhaps the reason God has entrusted to us more than we need is not for our own advancement. It's not necessarily for our own growth and enjoyment of material things. Perhaps it's so we can be the delivery system into God's economy, being a part of his redemptive purposes in the world. Something to think about today. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we've got one more segment. We're going to get to as many calls as we can. I got room for maybe 2 more calls. 800-525-7000. We'll be right back. Great to have you with us today on Faith and Finance Live. Well, Bob Dahl is here, and it's a good thing because the Dow just closed above 53,000 for the first time. Bob, I'm looking at your quarterly commentary here, and as we look back at the previous quarter, your headline is pretty staggering. Read that to us and give us some commentary on it.
Yeah, we had a war, and we had $100 oil, and guess what? Stocks had one of their best quarters in 50-plus years. It's incredible.
Incredible.
And, you and I have talked around this before. The missing ingredient in that little sentence is, and earnings were off the charts by a magnitude nobody would have guessed. That's what allowed stocks to overpower the problems of $100 oil and a war.
Yeah,
what a quarter
that's
it was.
Unbelievable, Bob. And then the question is, okay, where do we go from here? And obviously, if we can get to the end of this war, we can get oil back where it needs to be. We still have a few other issues that are going on here that would support the bear case, right?
Yes, we do. Let's hope they're minority probabilities. The other thing that speaks out to the bears, of course, is valuation. When stocks are this richly valued relative to earnings and cash flow, things better be nearly perfect for stocks to go up. And that's been the case. We've gone from high valuations to still high valuations. Actually, the S&P 500's valuation, the PE, price earnings ratio, Rob, fell in the first quarter, even as stocks went up. Stocks went up roughly 10% in the first half of the year. Earnings estimates went up 15%, so PEs actually fell by 5%. So relative to earnings, stocks are actually cheaper today than they were on January 1st.
Wow, that is unbelievable, Bob. Now, I know as you assess what might come of the second half here, there's several things you're suggesting. One of those is, and this was a part of some of your themes even at the beginning of the year, is that international perhaps might be where we see some outperformance. Is that right?
Yes, because non-U.S. markets are cheaper than the U.S., and importantly, earnings comparisons are improving overseas. That's what allowed international to beat the U.S. last year. That continued until the war this year, interrupted by the war where the dollar went up and U.S. outperformed. Now that oil's come back down, the dollar's come back down, international has reasserted itself. So when the year is said and done, we think it'll be another year where international stocks have outperformed the U.S., even as the U.S. does just fine, thank you.
Yes, exactly. Bob, curious about the midterms and just what this red-hot market, especially if we can get oil back down to reasonable levels, what impact this might have.
Well, certainly, I put it this way. Lower oil prices, gasoline at the pump, call it $3 a barrel, has to happen for the Republicans to have a chance to keep the House. Yeah. You know the history, Rob. In the midterm election, the party that's in power, the party that holds the White House, almost always loses seats. And the margin of Republican majority is so small, a typical loss would be at least 20 to 25 seats, which would handily turn the House back to the Democrats. That's my best guess. We'll see.
Yeah. Bob, where do you think stocks go from here in the back half? Do you think we're in kind of a trading range, or do you think the momentum is clearly to the upside?
Well, I noticed that the stock market today is about, that is the S&P 500, is below where it was a month ago. We're treading water, Rob. The change, in my judgment, not to be negative, is that there were two conditions for the bull market this year. One, earnings estimates exceeding expectations, and number two, the Fed being on our side. Earnings are still fine. I think they'll be good but not great in the second half compared to expectations because expectations have moved up so much. Now, when it comes to the Fed, the fear is the possibility, because of inflation's not under control, is the Fed could threaten to, if not actually raise rates. So one of our key conclusions is those two legs are a little bit more in question. So by definition, we have to be a little bit more cautious. Doesn't mean stocks have to go down, but I think it's going to be hard to get them on the trajectory we've seen in the first half of the year, i.e. basically straight up.
Really helpful. Bob, does tech still lead the way in the back half of the year?
I think tech will be in the hunt. If tech's not, the market's in trouble because most of these averages, 35, 40+% of the weight is technology. So they have to perform for the stock market to do okay. I think tech will be mixed. It'll be volatile. But I think it's going to be hard to make a lot of money this year if you don't own tech.
Yeah. What about just quickly on some of these assets that are not as correlated to the market, gold, and what about crypto and specifically Bitcoin? Yeah,
they've obviously been a real struggle, and my guess is they're going to be bouncing around and going nowhere. I think it's going to take time and a changed structure, changed cycle, which we're not yet ready for before these assets come back noticeably.
Bob, thanks for your time, as always.
Have a great week.
All right, that's Bob Dahl. He's CEO and CIO at Crossmark Global Investments. Check out his quarterly investment commentary where he does a review of the second quarter 26. He also does the outlook on where he thinks everything is headed. He looks at valuations, makes some second half assumptions, and then draws some conclusions as to where we might be headed over the balance of the year. This is the type of content you can get free from Bob every week at crossmarkglobal.com. All right, quickly to Florida. Paula, how can I help you?
Hello. I had a question. I bought a home. The home was $265,000. I put in everything but $10,000. An ex-boyfriend put the $10,000 in. We took a home equity loan out. We did spend some of the money on the home, but he proceeded to withdraw $72,000 and wrote the checks out to himself. And lawyers are telling me that he wants me to pay half of it back. There's nothing that I can do because the way that the contract was written up.
Yeah. So both of your names are on the home equity loan, is that right?
Oh, yes.
Okay. And what about the home's title?
Both names are on there.
Yeah. Wow. Are you living there?
Yes, it's actually 3 acres, and we built a barn with some of the money, and he is living 300 yards away. Oh, man, I'm so sorry. Yeah, well, this is a great reminder of why we don't do this, but I understand you're in the situation and you need to protect yourself. Listen, I'm not an attorney, so you need to heed their counsel and heed it very closely. I would just say, and you may have already tried this, have you contacted the lender and explained what's happening and asked whether the line can be frozen or suspended or what other options you have? I went to the bank, and that was as far as I went. I have sought attorneys. We did have a trust drawn up, and the lawyer told me that as far as the house, with the trust, it's a contract. The house cannot be sold unless both of you agree. Yeah. But he's not. He wants me to pay half the home equity loan back. More than half. He took out $72,000, and I have copies
of the check. I mean, the first thing I did is I'm a ledger person, and I made copies of every single check that he wrote out to himself. So I do have that.
Yeah. And is there more room on the line?
Yeah, unfortunately, they told me that there isn't any more. There was $100,000, and he took everything out. The $72,000 he took out because he said it was safer with him. And then when I approached him about selling the house and going our separate ways, he wants me to pay. Not only I paid for most of the house, he only gave me $10,000, and he wants me to give him half of the house and pay half of the home equity, or he's not going anywhere.
Yeah. Well, boy, I'm so sorry, Paula. I think you need to get. I know you've talked to attorneys. You need to find somebody who's willing to come alongside you and help you, seeking, first of all, reimbursement if he's using joint debt for his own personal expenses, and whether you could obtain a court order limiting further draws or otherwise protecting your interest, just given the situation here. And again, I'm not an attorney, but of course the lender's going to hold both of you responsible because they can, because both of your names are on the deed and the loan. And if if payments are missed, both credit histories certainly are going to be affected. And that's why I think we've got this at the end of the day, this is not just a financial disagreement. This is a legal matter. And so you need somebody who's willing to represent you and kind of walk with you through this process to try to curb the additional borrowing and then, protect your interests with regard to seeking reimbursement, just given that these were used for personal expenses and not for your benefit and not to improve the property that you both jointly own. So unfortunately, I don't have anything else to offer other than to direct you back to an attorney and perhaps somebody else who's just willing to come alongside you and help to serve and support you and helping to navigate the legal system given where you find yourself. Listen, I'll ask the Faith and Finance Live community to be praying for you, Paula. I know you need wisdom here. We need God to intervene here, but please keep us posted on how this turns out. And I think finding a godly attorney is your next best option. Thanks for being on the program today. I'm so sorry for what you're dealing with. Folks, that's going to do it for us. Big thanks to my team today, Josh, Tahira, Jim, Omar, and everybody here at FaithFi that makes this possible. By the way, if you want to support our work here at FaithFi, just go to faithfi.com/give. Faith and Finance Live is a partnership between Moody Radio and FaithFi. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.